My name is Evelyn Parker. I'm 62 years old, and I live in Seattle, Washington. I came back from work early and found my 33-year-old son, Andrew Parker, burying a black bag in the middle of the backyard. He was pale and shaking badly. When I asked where his 31-year-old brother Michael was, he stayed silent. My mother's instinct told me something, but I didn't want to believe it. When I opened that bag and saw what it was, my vision went dark and I fainted. But let me back up and tell you how I got here, to this moment that would shatter everything I thought I knew about my family. I'm Evelyn Parker, a woman who spent 35 years building a life from nothing. After my husband Richard died of a heart attack when the boys were just teenagers, I worked 3 jobs to keep our modest home in the Green Lake neighborhood. I was a nurse at Swedish Medical Center during the day, cleaned offices at night, and spent weekends catering small events. Every dollar I earned went toward keeping my sons fed, clothed, and educated. I sacrificed vacations, new clothes for myself, and even postponed necessary medical procedures to ensure Andrew and Michael had opportunities I never did. Over those years, I saved $127,000 in a special account. That money represented every missed dinner, every sleepless night, every moment I chose their future over my present. It was meant to be split between them when I retired, a nest egg to help them truly launch their adult lives. They both knew about it. I'd told them countless times, "This is for your futures, boys. Everything I do is for you." Andrew, my eldest, always seemed like the responsible one. He worked as a financial advisor and had recently gotten engaged to a woman named Jennifer. Michael, younger by 2 years, was an architect with a promising career. They'd always been close growing up, finishing each other's sentences, defending each other against neighborhood bullies. As their mother, watching their bond gave me more joy than anything else in this world. That Tuesday in October started like any other. I'd taken an early shift at the hospital, planning to leave by 3 o'clock to prepare for Andrew's birthday dinner that evening. He was turning 33, and I'd spent weeks planning his favorite meal: pot roast with roasted vegetables, homemade dinner rolls, and a chocolate cake with cream cheese frosting. The whole family was coming: Michael, Andrew's fiancée Jennifer, and even my sister Margaret from Portland. But fate had other plans. At 1:30, we had a sudden staff shortage, and I managed to get coverage so I could leave at 2. I drove home through the autumn rain, my windshield wipers beating rhythmically, thinking about how blessed I was to have 2 sons who still wanted to celebrate milestones with their mother. When I pulled into my driveway at 2:40, I noticed Andrew's car parked at an odd angle, one tire up on the grass. The front door was slightly ajar. My heart began to pound with that inexplicable maternal instinct that something was wrong. I walked through my house calling both boys' names. The living room was undisturbed, but when I looked out the kitchen window toward the backyard, I saw him. Andrew was on his knees in the middle of the lawn, his usually pressed business suit covered in mud, and something darker. In his trembling hands was a shovel, and beside him sat a large black garbage bag, the heavy-duty kind, bulging with something substantial. His face was ghostly white, streaked with tears and dirt, and his hands shook so violently he could barely grip the shovel handle. I ran outside, my nurse's instincts kicking in. "Andrew, what's wrong? Are you hurt?" The rain was coming down harder now, soaking through my scrubs. He looked up at me with eyes I didn't recognize, wild, terrified, empty. "Mom," he whispered, his voice breaking. "Mom, I didn't mean to. I swear I didn't mean to." My blood turned to ice. "Where's Michael?" I demanded. "Andrew, where is your brother?" He just stared at the bag and started sobbing. With shaking hands, I reached for the zipper. "Mom, don't," he started, but it was too late. Inside that bag, I saw Michael's favorite blue jacket, the one I'd bought him last Christmas. It was covered in blood. Beneath it, I saw his face, pale and still, his eyes closed as if sleeping. My baby boy, my Michael. The world tilted. The last thing I remembered was the wet grass rushing up to meet me, and Andrew's anguished scream piercing the rain. Before we continue with what happened next, if you're as shocked as I was in that moment, please hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. I need your support to finish telling this story. Also, leave a comment letting me know where you're watching from and what time it is there. Knowing I'm not alone in this makes all the difference. When I opened my eyes, I was lying on my living room couch, a cold compress on my forehead. Andrew sat across from me, in Richard's old armchair, his head in his hands, rocking back and forth. My sister Margaret stood by the window, her phone pressed to her ear, speaking in urgent whispers. How did she get here? What time was it? My mind was a fog of confusion and horror. "Don't call them," Andrew suddenly shouted, lunging toward Margaret. "Please, Aunt Marge, don't call the police. You don't understand." Margaret stepped back, her face a mixture of fear and disgust. She'd clearly seen what I'd seen. "Andrew, your brother is dead. There's a body in your mother's backyard. What exactly don't I understand?" I struggled to sit up, every muscle in my body feeling like lead. "What happened?" My voice came out as a croak, barely recognizable as my own. "Andrew Michael Parker. You tell me right now what happened to Michael." Using his full name, something I only did when he was in serious trouble as a child, seemed to break through his panic. He looked at me with red-rimmed eyes and said words that made no sense. "He's not dead, Mom. Michael's not dead." I felt my sanity slipping. Had I imagined it? Was I losing my mind? "Andrew, I saw him. I saw his face, the blood." "That's not Michael in that bag," Andrew interrupted, his voice stronger now, almost frantic with the need to explain. "Mom, Michael did something terrible. That's Jennifer in there." The name hit me like a physical blow. Jennifer, his fiancée, the sweet woman with the bright laugh who worked at a veterinary clinic, who'd been planning their wedding for next spring, who'd helped me pick out new curtains for my kitchen just last month. "What are you saying?" Margaret moved closer to me protectively. Andrew stood up, pacing like a caged animal. "I came home from work around noon. Jennifer said she needed to talk to me about something urgent. When I got here, she was waiting in the backyard with Michael. His voice broke. "They told me together. They've been having an affair for 8 months. 8 months, Mom. Behind my back, in my bed, planning their future together. Jennifer said she never loved me, that she only got engaged because I had money and stability. But she'd fallen in love with Michael. I felt like I was listening to a stranger describe a movie plot. This couldn't be my family. My boys adored each other. They'd never betray one another like this." "There has to be some mistake," I whispered. But even as I said it, fragments of memory began surfacing. Michael canceling family dinners at the last minute. Jennifer's phone always face down on the table. Andrew mentioning that Jennifer seemed distant, asking if I thought she was having cold feet about the wedding. "There's no mistake," Andrew continued, his voice hollow. "Michael showed me pictures on his phone, Mom. Pictures of them together, messages, plane tickets to Hawaii, where they'd been planning to run away next month, right before what was supposed to be my wedding." He laughed. "Mom!" He looked me in the eye and laughed, said he'd been sleeping with my fiancé in my own apartment while I was at work, using the key I'd given him for emergencies. The cruelty of it hit me like a tidal wave. "But Jennifer, what happened to Jennifer?" Margaret asked the question I couldn't form. Andrew's face crumbled. "She started taunting me. She said I was boring, that Michael was better than me in every way, that she pitied me for being so blind." I just stood there frozen. "Then she said something about your money, Mom. She said they were going to take your retirement account, the $127,000, that Michael had been planning to convince you to give it all to him early, and they were going to use it to start their new life together." My heart stopped. That money, my life's work. They were going to steal it? "Michael said he deserved it more than me anyway," Andrew continued, his voice rising. "He said you always loved him more, that I was the boring responsible one and he was your favorite. He said he'd already forged some documents, that he was planning to drain that account next week." Jennifer laughed and called me a pathetic mama's boy. I watched Andrew's face transform as he relived the moment. Something inside me just snapped, Mom. I pushed her. I swear I only meant to push her away from me, to make her stop laughing. But she was standing at the edge of the stone patio, and she fell backward. Her head hit the corner of that decorative rock border you put in last year. There was so much blood. I tried to help her, I swear I did, but she wasn't breathing. Michael just stood there staring, then he ran. "Michael ran away?" I asked, trying to process this nightmare. "Where did he go?" Andrew wiped his face roughly. "I don't know. He took off in his car. Before he left, he said he'd call the police and tell them I murdered Jennifer in cold blood out of jealousy. He said he'd testify against me, that no one would believe it was an accident, that I'd spend the rest of my life in prison. He said," Andrew's voice dropped to barely a whisper, "he said he always hated me, that he'd been jealous of me his whole life, and this was his chance to finally destroy me." The rain had stopped, but the October evening brought a bone-deep chill into my house. Margaret had made tea that none of us touched. We sat in my living room, the same room where I'd watched my boys open Christmas presents, celebrated their graduations, hosted their birthday parties, and tried to comprehend the incomprehensible. My family, my beautiful family, had imploded in the span of a few hours. "We need to call the police," Margaret said for the third time, though her voice was less certain now. "This was an accident, Andrew. You pushed her. She fell. It's tragic, but it's not murder. They'll understand." Andrew laughed bitterly, a sound that chilled me more than anything else that day. "Will they? A woman is dead in my mother's backyard, and my brother, the only other witness, is going to testify that I killed her intentionally. Who do you think they'll believe?" I stood on shaking legs. "Show me." Andrew looked up, confused. "What?" "Show me everything," I said, surprised by the strength in my voice. "If we're going to figure this out, I need to see everything. The backyard, your phone, whatever evidence exists. I need to understand exactly what happened." We walked outside together, Margaret staying close to my side. The evening light was fading, casting long shadows across my previously peaceful garden. The black bag still lay beside the half-dug hole, and I forced myself not to look at it directly. Andrew's hands were still caked with mud and blood. "Start from the beginning," I commanded. "Tell me every detail." Andrew took a shuddering breath. "Jennifer texted me at 11:45. She said it was urgent, that she needed to see me immediately at your house. She knew you'd be at work. When I got here at 12:15, she and Michael were standing right there." He pointed to the stone patio I'd installed last spring for $3,200, money I'd saved from overtime shifts. "They were holding hands, Mom, standing there holding hands like it was the most natural thing in the world." "What exactly did they say?" Margaret asked, her prosecutor's mind clicking into gear despite her shock. "My sister had worked as a paralegal for 20 years before retiring. Michael spoke first. He said, 'Bro, we need to talk about your future.' Just like that, so casual. Then Jennifer said, 'Andrew, I can't marry you. I'm in love with Michael. I have been for months.' I thought it was a joke at first, some kind of sick prank. But then Michael put his arm around her waist and said, 'She's mine now. She's always been mine.'" Hearing those words, I felt something break inside me. The Michael I'd raised would never do this. The gentle boy who cried when he accidentally stepped on a snail, who defended smaller kids from bullies, who wrote me Mother's Day cards with heartfelt messages about how much he loved me. Where had that boy gone? "Then what happened?" I asked. "I just stood there. I couldn't move, couldn't think." Jennifer started talking about how unfulfilling our relationship was, how she'd been faking everything. Every kiss, every "I love you," every plan we'd made together. All lies. She said Michael was passionate and exciting while I was dull and predictable. Then she said, Andrew's voice caught. She said she couldn't wait to spend our money on her real future with Michael. Our money? Margaret seized on that. She specifically mentioned Evelyn's savings? Andrew nodded, pulling out his phone with trembling hands. I recorded it. Part of it anyway. I don't know why. Maybe some instinct to document what was happening. Here. He fumbled with the phone, then pressed play. Jennifer's voice came through, tinny but clear. And let's be honest, Andrew. Your mom's little nest egg is going to really help us out. Michael says she's been saving for years. What is it, over $100,000? That'll get us started nicely in California. We're thinking San Diego, somewhere sunny and far from here. Your mom practically owes it to Michael anyway, after all those years of praising you as the responsible one. He deserves something for living in your shadow. Then Michael's voice, the sound of it like a knife to my heart. She always loved you more, Drew. Always. Andrew got straight A's. Andrew got promoted. Andrew's so reliable. Well, guess what? I'm taking something you love now, and I'm taking what should have been my money too. Mom's going to give it to me willingly when I tell her I want to start a business. She can never say no to me. There was shuffling, then Andrew's voice, raw with pain. You're my brother. How could you do this? Michael's laugh was cruel. Blood doesn't mean shit when you've spent your whole life being second best. Jennifer, show him those pictures. Let him see exactly what we've been doing. The recording cut off. Andrew's face was ashen. That's when Jennifer started showing me photos on her phone. Pictures of them together at the hotel downtown, the one where we were supposed to have our wedding reception. Pictures in my apartment, in my bed, text messages planning their escape. They'd booked flights for November 17th, exactly 1 week before our wedding date. They were going to drain your account on the 16th and disappear the next day. I felt sick. They'd planned this, meticulously and cruelly. The documents Michael mentioned, Margaret asked. Did you see them? Andrew shook his head. No, but I believe him. Michael's been handling some of Mom's paperwork for the past year, since he lives closer to her bank. He had access. We stood in silence, the weight of betrayal crushing us all. Finally, I spoke. What happened after the recording stopped? Andrew sat on the stone steps leading to my garden, his head bowed. In the gathering darkness, he looked like a broken man, nothing like the confident son I'd raised. After I heard all of that, saw those pictures, I just disconnected from my body. It felt like watching myself from far away. Jennifer wouldn't stop. She kept going, describing every intimate detail of her relationship with Michael, telling me how she'd laughed about me with him, how pathetic I was. Margaret put a hand on my shoulder as I swayed. This level of cruelty was beyond comprehension. I asked Michael why. Andrew continued. Just why. We were brothers. I'd have given him anything if he'd asked. He looked at me with pure hatred and said, because watching you pretend to be perfect all these years has been torture. Mom gave you everything. Her approval, her pride, her attention. I was just the screw-up younger brother. Well, now I'm taking everything from you, your woman, your dignity, and Mom's money. That's when Jennifer laughed again. She said, your mom's going to be so disappointed in you when she finds out you couldn't even keep a woman. And I couldn't take any more. I stepped toward her, not to hurt her, Mom, I swear. I just wanted her to stop talking. But she backed away dramatically, like I was attacking her. And she said, see, Michael, he's violent, just like I told you. We should call the police right now. Andrew's voice broke completely. She was still laughing when she took another step back. Her heel caught on the edge of the patio. I watched it happen in slow motion, her arms windmilling, her expression changing from mockery to surprise. She fell backward, and the sound of her head hitting that decorative boulder was, God, Mom, I can still hear it. This awful crack, and then silence. I closed my eyes, visualizing the scene. That border of river rocks, each one the size of a basketball, that I'd arranged myself, thinking they looked elegant. Now one of them had become an instrument of death. What did Michael do? I asked quietly. He ran to her, checked for a pulse. His hands were shaking. He looked up at me and said, she's dead. You killed her. I tried to explain that she fell, that it was an accident, but he was already backing away. He said, I'm calling 911 right now, and I'm telling them you murdered my girlfriend in a jealous rage. Everyone knows you have a temper. Remember that time in high school when you punched Jason Miller for bullying me? They'll believe you're capable of this. Margaret interjected. But that's not the same thing at all. You were defending your brother from a bully when you were 17. That's hardly evidence of murderous intent. Andrew laughed hollowly. Tell that to a jury after Michael testifies against me with tears in his eyes, playing the grieving boyfriend. He said he'd tell everyone I'd always been jealous of him, that I'd threatened Jennifer before, that she was afraid of me. All lies, but believable lies. Did you try to stop him from leaving? I asked. Andrew shook his head. I was in shock, just staring at Jennifer's body, at all the blood. By the time I snapped out of it, he was gone. I sat there for an hour, maybe more, just frozen. Then I realized I couldn't let this happen. I couldn't let Michael destroy me for an accident, not after what he'd already done. So he gestured to the black bag. I panicked. I thought if I buried her, maybe I'd have time to think, to figure out what to do. Andrew, that's the worst possible decision you could have made, Margaret said firmly. Now it looks like you were trying to hide a crime. If you'd called 911 immediately, if you'd told them the truth, they wouldn't have believed me, Andrew shouted, startling both of us. Don't you understand? It's my word against Michael's, and Michael is convincing. He always has been. He could charm anyone, talk his way out of anything. Remember when he totaled Dad's car and somehow convinced everyone it wasn't his fault? Remember when money went missing from your wallet, Mom, and he blamed it on his friends? I did remember. Little inconsistencies over the years that I'd explained away, always giving Michael the benefit of the doubt because he seemed so sincere, so vulnerable. Had I been blind? There's something else, Andrew said quietly. In the recordings I have, there are more on my phone. Jennifer mentioned something about a life insurance policy. Apparently, Michael convinced me to make her the beneficiary of my $500,000 work policy 6 months ago, saying it showed commitment. I barely remembered signing the paperwork. He'd brought it to me during a stressful work week. Margaret and I exchanged glances. This was worse than we'd thought. So Michael had a financial motive too, Margaret said slowly. If something happened to you after you married Jennifer, she'd get $500,000, which she'd presumably share with Michael. And with your mother's $127,000, that's over $600,000 total they were planning to access. The calculation was sickening. My sons, or at least one of them, had been planning to financially devastate our family. We moved back inside, unable to stand in that backyard another moment. Margaret made actual coffee this time, strong and black, and we gathered around my kitchen table, the same table where I'd fed my boys thousands of meals, helped with homework, celebrated every milestone. Now it felt contaminated by the knowledge of what had happened outside. "We need to see everything," Margaret said, her paralegal training taking over. "Andrew, show us all the evidence you have, every recording, every text message, every document. We need to understand the full scope of what Michael and Jennifer were planning." Andrew pulled out his phone and a laptop he'd apparently brought from his car. "I've been documenting things for a while," he admitted. "I didn't want to believe something was wrong, but about 3 months ago, I started noticing inconsistencies." He opened his laptop and showed us a folder labeled Concerns with over 50 files inside. Jennifer started coming home late, saying she was working extended shifts at the clinic. But when I called to bring her dinner one night, they said she'd left at her regular time. When I asked her about it, she said I'd called the wrong location. But we both knew she only worked at one clinic. He opened text messages. Then there were these weird exchanges with Michael. He'd ask me when I'd be out of town for work, whether Jennifer would be alone. At the time, I thought he was being a protective brother-in-law, checking on her safety. Now I realize he was asking when the coast was clear. The messages were damning. Michael had texted Andrew just 3 weeks ago. "Big conference next week, right? 3 days in Portland? Jennifer must hate being alone in that apartment." Andrew had responded, "Yeah, she's not thrilled, but it's good money. Maybe you could check on her." "And I did," Andrew said bitterly. "I checked on her every single time Andrew was away. That's when most of those photos were taken." We scrolled through bank statements next. "Look at this." Andrew pointed to several cash withdrawals from his account. $500 here, $800 there, $100 and $200 here. I never made these withdrawals. When I asked Jennifer about them, we had a joint account after the engagement. She said she was buying wedding decorations and deposits, that she was keeping it as a surprise. I thought it was sweet. I transferred $15,000 into that joint account specifically for wedding expenses. Margaret leaned closer, her eyes narrowing. "But there are no corresponding deposits or purchases for any wedding vendors. Where did this money go?" Andrew opened another folder. "I hired a private investigator 3 weeks ago. I felt guilty about it, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Look what he found." The PI's report was comprehensive and heartbreaking. Jennifer and Michael had opened a joint bank account in August. The $15,000 Andrew had given Jennifer for wedding expenses had been deposited there, along with several other transfers totaling another $8,700, money Jennifer had systematically taken from their joint account through various means. They'd also opened a credit card in Andrew's name, without his knowledge, and racked up $22,000 in charges, all at hotels, restaurants, and stores in preparation for their planned escape. "They were living a double life entirely on your money," Margaret said, disgusted. "That's fraud, Andrew. Clear-cut identity theft and fraud." But the worst was yet to come. Andrew opened an email thread between Michael and Jennifer. The PI got access to Jennifer's email somehow. I don't know how, and I don't want to know. But look at this exchange from 2 months ago. Jennifer had written, "Michael, are you sure your mom's going to give you that money? That's our entire exit strategy. Without it, we can't start fresh in California." Michael had responded, "Don't worry, baby. I've been her precious little boy my whole life. She'll give me anything I ask for. Plus, I've been handling her banking paperwork for months. I've got power of attorney for her accounts in case of emergency. She signed it without even reading it. Trusts me completely. If she won't give it willingly, I'll take it anyway. She'll never even know until we're long gone." I felt physically ill. Power of attorney? I'd signed some papers Michael brought me last spring, saying it was just a precaution in case something happened to me medically. I stood abruptly from the table, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Show me," I demanded. "Show me these papers I supposedly signed." My voice was shaking with a mixture of rage and heartbreak I'd never experienced before. The betrayal cut deeper than anything I could have imagined. This wasn't just about infidelity or theft. My own son had systematically positioned himself to steal my life savings, the money I'd sacrificed everything for. Andrew hesitated. "Mom, maybe you should sit down." "Don't tell me to sit down," I snapped, surprising both him and Margaret. "My son, my baby boy, has apparently been planning to rob me blind, and you want me to sit down? Get me those papers. Now." We went to my home office, a small converted bedroom where I kept all my important documents. My filing system was meticulous, organized by year and category. Under Financial 2025, I found a folder labeled Banking Updates that I barely remembered creating. Inside were several documents, and when I began reading them, my legs nearly gave out. The first document was indeed a power of attorney, granting Michael Parker full authority to access, manage, and transfer funds from all my accounts in the event of physical or mental incapacity. But there was more, a second document titled Authorized Signatory Agreement that gave him the right to make withdrawals and transfers up to $150,000 without additional verification. I had signed both documents. My signature was authentic, witnessed by someone named Patricia Monroe, Notary Public. "I remember this day," I whispered, sinking into my desk chair. It was last April, around Easter. Michael came over with these papers and said his friend, who was a financial planner, had recommended that everyone over 60 should have these documents in place. He said it was just a safety measure, that if I ever had a stroke or accident, someone could pay my bills and manage my affairs. It made sense. I trusted him completely. Margaret took the documents, studying them carefully. "Evelyn, this Patricia Monroe, do you remember her?" I shook my head. Michael said she was a mobile notary he'd hired to make it convenient for me. She came to the house, watched me sign, and left. The whole thing took maybe 15 minutes. Michael was so attentive, so concerned about my well-being. He said, "Mom, I love you so much. I just want to make sure you're protected." My voice broke on those last words. "This is a legal document," Margaret said grimly. "With your signature and a notary seal, Michael could have drained your account at any time. In fact," she pulled out her phone, "we need to check your accounts right now to make sure he hasn't already started transferring money." My hands shook as I logged into my bank account on my computer. The main savings account, the one with $127,000 in it, showed a balance that made my heart stop. $89,450. "Where's the rest?" I gasped, clicking frantically through the transaction history. There, in the past 3 weeks, were 4 separate transfers: $12,000 on October 1st, $8,500 on October 7th, $9,800 on October 14th, and $7,250 just yesterday, October 20th. Each was labeled Transfer to M. Parker, Agreed Family Loan. "He's already stolen $37,550 from me," I said, my voice hollow. "Over $37,000 that took me years to save. Years of double shifts and skipped meals and worn-out shoes because I couldn't afford new ones. Gone. Just gone." Andrew moved beside me, looking at the screen with horror. "Mom, I had no idea. I swear I didn't know he'd already started taking it." He paused, then added quietly, "But this proves he was serious. This proves everything I told you about their plan was real." Margaret was already on her phone. "I'm calling my old boss. He's a criminal defense attorney now. We need legal advice immediately." But I held up my hand. "Wait, before we do anything, we need to think this through. If we call the police, what happens? Andrew gets arrested for Jennifer's death, which was an accident. Michael becomes the sympathetic grieving boyfriend and turns state's witness against his own brother. He's stolen nearly $40,000 from me. But with these documents, he'll claim it was authorized, that I knew about the family loans. But the emails prove it was theft," Margaret protested. "They prove he and Jennifer were conspiring to take your money and disappear." I looked at Andrew, really looked at him. My responsible son, who'd never given me a moment's trouble, who'd held down a good job, saved diligently, and planned a future with a woman who was betraying him at every turn. Now he sat in my kitchen, covered in mud and blood, having accidentally killed that woman. Meanwhile, Michael, My charming, troubled younger son, who I'd always made excuses for, had revealed himself to be someone I didn't know at all. "There's something else," I said slowly, a memory surfacing. 2 weeks ago, Michael asked me if I'd ever consider early retirement. He said I'd worked so hard and deserved to enjoy life, that maybe I should access my savings now and travel, see the world. He offered to help me invest the money more aggressively for better returns. He said he knew someone who could get me 12% annual returns, guaranteed. Andrew's face darkened. "Let me guess. He wanted you to transfer the money to this investment account he'd set up?" I nodded. I told him I'd think about it, but honestly, I was too busy to follow up. If I had, I couldn't finish the sentence. We sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of our situation crushing. Outside, night had fully fallen. Jennifer's body still lay in my backyard, a terrible secret that grew heavier with each passing hour. Andrew's life hung in the balance, dependent on decisions we made in the next few hours, and Michael, my son, who I'd loved and protected his entire life, was out there somewhere, probably already crafting his version of events to the police. "We need to think strategically," Margaret finally said, her voice calm despite the chaos. "Let's assess what we know versus what we can prove." She pulled out a notepad and began writing. "Facts. Jennifer is dead from an accidental fall during a confrontation. Andrew has audio recordings of Jennifer and Michael admitting to their affair and their plan to steal Evelyn's money. We have documentary evidence that Michael has already stolen $37,550 using fraudulently obtained power of attorney. We have emails and text messages proving conspiracy to commit fraud and identity theft. But," Andrew interjected, "we also have me trying to bury a body, which makes me look guilty of murder. We have Michael as a witness who will testify that I killed Jennifer in a rage, and we have the fact that I waited hours before calling anyone, which destroys any claim of innocence." He put his head in his hands. "I've destroyed my own life. Even if I prove the affair, even if we prove Michael was stealing from Mom, I still killed someone and tried to hide it. I'm going to prison." I looked at my son, my good son, who'd made one catastrophic error in judgment during the worst moment of his life. Then I thought of Michael, who'd systematically planned to destroy both his brother and his mother for money. The injustice of it ignited something fierce inside me. "No," I said firmly. "You're not going to prison. Not if I can help it." They both looked at me. "Mom, I don't see how—" Andrew started, but I cut him off. "Michael thinks he's so clever, but he's made mistakes. He's left a trail of evidence, and he doesn't know that we know about it. That gives us an advantage." I stood up and began pacing, my mind racing. "Margaret, if Andrew had called 911 immediately, told them everything about the affair and the confrontation, would they have believed the fall was an accident?" Margaret considered this carefully. Possibly. The audio recording would have supported his story. The physical evidence, Jennifer falling backwards onto the rocks, would be consistent with an accident. But the fact that he tried to hide the body complicates everything. It shows consciousness of guilt. She paused. "However, there's a concept in law called panic response. Sometimes when someone witnesses a traumatic accident, especially if they've been threatened, they make irrational decisions. It's not common, but it has been successfully argued in cases before." "What if," I said slowly, "what if Jennifer's death was reported but not by Andrew?" They both stared at me. "What do you mean?" Andrew asked. "I mean, what if I discovered Jennifer's body and called the police? What if the story was that I came home from work, found Jennifer dead in my backyard, and had no idea how she got there? Andrew, where were you supposed to be this afternoon officially?" "At work. I took a half day but didn't tell anyone. I just left after that text from Jennifer." His eyes widened as he understood where I was going. "So your office thinks you were there all day?" He nodded slowly. "My calendar shows a full day of client meetings. But Mom, I can't let you—" "Listen to me," I interrupted. "If we're going to do this, we need to think it through completely. Margaret, in a scenario where I found a body in my backyard with no witnesses, what would the police investigation look like?" Margaret frowned, clearly uncomfortable with this direction. "Evelyn, what you're suggesting is obstruction of justice. It's serious." "What I'm suggesting," I said firmly, "is preventing an innocent man from going to prison while his guilty brother goes free. Now answer the question." She sighed deeply. "The police would investigate the scene, determine cause of death, and try to establish who the victim was and why she was there. They'd interview anyone who knew Jennifer, which would include both Andrew and Michael. They'd look for evidence of who she was with before she died. And if Michael tells them Jennifer was there to meet Andrew, I pressed, they'd question Andrew, look at his alibi. If his work records show he was supposedly in meetings, if his colleagues confirm he was there or thought he was there, it creates reasonable doubt. They'd also investigate Michael, especially if— Margaret's eyes widened as she understood. Especially if evidence emerged that Michael and Jennifer were having an affair. That gives Michael a motive for murder, eliminating his girlfriend to avoid being exposed, then framing his brother. Exactly, I said, feeling the pieces click into place. Michael doesn't know about Andrew's recordings. He doesn't know we have the emails. He thinks Andrew was the only witness, and he's planning to claim Andrew murdered Jennifer in a jealous rage. Andrew stood abruptly. Absolutely not. Mom, I can't let you risk yourself for me. If this goes wrong, you could be charged with obstruction, tampering with evidence, who knows what else. I made the mistake of trying to hide Jennifer's body. I should face the consequences. His voice was resolute, but I could see the fear in his eyes. I walked over to my son and took his face in my hands the way I had when he was a little boy. You listened to me, Andrew Michael Parker. I brought you into this world. I raised you. I sacrificed everything to give you a good life. I am not going to watch you go to prison for an accident while your brother, who has committed actual crimes, walks free. Do you understand me? Tears streamed down his face. But Mom— No buts. Margaret, tell me honestly, if we do this right, if we're smart and careful, can it work? My sister looked between us, conflict clear on her face. Finally she said, I never thought I'd say this, but maybe. The recording is key. If the police hear Michael and Jennifer talking about their conspiracy, if they see the financial evidence of theft, Michael becomes a prime suspect in Jennifer's death. The affair gives him motive. He killed her to prevent exposure and frame his brother, maybe even to keep the stolen money for himself. But the timing, Andrew interjected. If Michael's already planning to call the police about me, if he reports that he witnessed me kill Jennifer, he hasn't called them yet, I pointed out. It's been hours. If he was going to report you immediately, he would have. He's waiting for something. Margaret nodded slowly. He's probably waiting to make sure Jennifer's body is hidden well enough that there's no physical evidence pointing to accident versus murder. He wants Andrew to be found with a buried body. That makes him look undeniably guilty. If Michael calls now and says he witnessed a murder, police would expect to find a body at the scene, fresh evidence, signs of struggle. But if he waits a day or two, then remembers what he witnessed, it gives Andrew time to dispose of evidence. So Michael's playing a game too, I said. He's not the only one who can play games. Here's what we're going to do. I took a deep breath. Andrew, you need to leave. Right now. Take your laptop, your phone with all those recordings, and drive to a hotel. Not in Seattle. Somewhere at least an hour away. Check in under your name. Make sure the timestamps are clear. Order room service, call down to the front desk about something, establish that you were there this evening. While I'm hiding? He asked bitterly. No, while you're creating an alibi. Margaret and I will handle things here. Tomorrow morning, you'll check out of the hotel and drive to your office like normal. When the police contact you about Jennifer's death, because they will, you'll be shocked and devastated. You were at a hotel because you needed space after a fight with Jennifer about wedding expenses. I was thinking on my feet now, adrenaline sharpening my mind. That's actually not far from the truth, Andrew said quietly. We did fight about money 3 days ago. She wanted an even more expensive venue. I told her we needed to be reasonable. She accused me of being cheap. Perfect, Margaret said, warming to the plan despite her obvious reservations. So you had a fight, needed space to think, and went to a hotel. You can show credit card receipts, hotel records. Meanwhile, Evelyn discovers the body tomorrow morning when she's working in her garden. She calls 911, has no idea how Jennifer got there or why. I continued, when police investigate, they'll find evidence of Jennifer and Michael's affair. They'll discover the financial theft. They'll interview Michael, who'll probably try to implicate Andrew, but won't have any real evidence because Andrew was at a hotel all evening. The recordings will reveal Michael and Jennifer's conspiracy, giving Michael a strong motive for murder. He killed Jennifer to silence her and frame his brother. There's one problem, Andrew said. The recordings. If I'm at a hotel, supposedly not knowing anything about Jennifer's death. How do I explain having recordings of her and Michael from earlier today? We all paused. He was right. That was a logical inconsistency. Then Margaret said, "The private investigator. You hired him weeks ago because you suspected an affair. What if he was watching today? What if he recorded Jennifer and Michael's confrontation with you in the backyard? You didn't know about it until later when he sent you his final report." "But there is no private investigator," Andrew said. "I mean, there was, but he only gave me written reports, no recordings." I smiled grimly. "Michael doesn't know that. The police don't know that." The next 12 hours moved like a nightmare in slow motion. Andrew left at 10:30 that evening, driving north toward Everett with instructions to check into a Holiday Inn and establish a clear timeline of his presence there. Margaret and I were left with the terrible task of managing the scene in my backyard. "We need to think about this carefully," Margaret said, her paralegal training clicking into full gear despite the moral complexity of what we were doing. "The police will investigate everything. They'll look at the angle of the fall, blood spatter patterns, time of death. We can't alter the physical evidence in ways that would contradict what actually happened." We went outside with flashlights. Jennifer's body still lay partially covered by the black bag. In the harsh LED light, she looked unreal, like a prop from a movie. But she wasn't a prop. She was a person who'd made terrible choices and paid the ultimate price. "The position of her body is consistent with a backward fall," Margaret observed clinically. "The head wound and blood pattern support impact with this rock. If police investigate, they'll determine she fell rather than being struck. So, we don't move her," I said, my stomach churning. "We just leave her here until morning." The thought of sleeping knowing Jennifer was in my backyard was unbearable. But Margaret was right. Any attempt to move her now could contaminate evidence in ways that would raise questions. "We need to move the bag, though," Margaret said. "And the shovel." Andrew was in panic mode, trying to hide the body. But in our version, Jennifer simply fell and died. And you found her in the morning. There should be no evidence of burial attempts. We carefully removed the black bag, which thankfully Jennifer's body had never been fully placed inside. We cleaned the shovel and returned it to my garden shed. We checked every inch of the backyard for anything that might contradict the story we were building. "What about cameras?" I suddenly asked. "Do any of my neighbors have security cameras that might show Andrew's car here this afternoon?" Margaret's face paled. "That's a crucial question. Do you know?" I thought hard. The Hendersons to the left had mentioned installing a Ring doorbell last year, but it faced their front door, not my property. The Chens to the right traveled frequently, and I'd never seen cameras. Behind my house was a green belt with a walking trail. No homes with a direct view. "I don't think so," I said. "But we should operate as if they might. That's why Andrew's timeline needs to be solid." We went back inside and I forced myself to go through my normal evening routine, though nothing felt normal. I took a shower, put on pajamas, set my alarm for 6 a.m. Margaret slept fitfully on my couch, both of us knowing we were crossing lines that couldn't be uncrossed. Around 2 a.m, my phone buzzed. A text from Andrew. "Checked in 11:47 p.m. Room 237. Had dinner at hotel restaurant. Staff saw me." "I can't believe we're doing this." I responded, "We're protecting you. Get some sleep. Tomorrow will be difficult." But I knew neither of us would sleep well tonight. As dawn broke gray and cold on October 22nd, Margaret and I drank coffee and went over the plan one final time. "I'm going to wait until 7:30, I said. "A reasonable time for me to be outside on my day off, working in the garden before it gets too cold. I'll notice Jennifer's body, check for a pulse, and immediately call 911. "You need to be genuinely shocked," Margaret coached me. "Don't overact, but remember, you supposedly have no idea how Jennifer got there or what happened. You last saw her 3 days ago at your house when she and Andrew came for dinner. At 7:25, I put on my gardening jacket and boots. My hands shook as I tied the laces. "Mom," Margaret said, using the familial term she rarely did, "are you absolutely sure about this? Once you make that call, there's no going back." I looked at my sister. "Michael has already stolen from me. He conspired to take everything I'd worked for and destroy his brother in the process. Jennifer participated in that cruelty willingly. They made their choices. Now I'm making mine. I won't let Andrew pay for an accident while Michael benefits from his actual crimes." I walked outside into the cold October morning. Frost covered my lawn, making everything look pristine and peaceful. Except for the body lying beside my decorative stone border, her skin pale gray in the early light. I stood there for a moment, gathering myself, then pulled out my phone and dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? The operator's calm voice seemed to come from another world. There's a woman in my backyard. She's not breathing. I think she's dead. Please, I need help. My voice shook. That part didn't require acting. Ma'am, can you check for a pulse? Yes, just a moment. I knelt beside Jennifer, my knees soaking through from the wet grass. Her skin was cold and stiff. I'd seen enough death as a nurse to know she'd been gone for many hours. The next hours unfolded exactly as Margaret had predicted. Police arrived within 8 minutes, followed by an ambulance and crime scene investigators. Detective Sarah Morrison, a woman in her early 40s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, took charge of the scene. I sat on my back porch wrapped in a blanket someone had given me, watching investigators photograph Jennifer's body and the surrounding area. Mrs. Parker, I need to ask you some questions, Detective Morrison said, sitting beside me with a notepad. I know this is traumatic, but anything you remember might help us understand what happened. I nodded, keeping my voice shaky. I don't understand how she got here. Jennifer was my son Andrew's fiancée. I saw her 3 days ago when she came for dinner. They seemed happy planning their wedding. Why would she be in my backyard? When did you last see your son Andrew? The detective asked. Yesterday morning. He stopped by on his way to work around 7:30. I've been working double shifts at Swedish Medical Center, so I wasn't home much yesterday. The lie came easier than I expected. And your other son, Michael? Something flickered across Detective Morrison's face at the name. I haven't seen Michael in about a week. Why? Does he have something to do with this? Before she could answer, another detective approached and whispered something to Morrison. Her expression hardened. Mrs. Parker, we're going to need to speak with both your sons. Can you provide contact information for them? I gave her their phone numbers with trembling hands. Please, detective, what happened to Jennifer? Was she murdered? We're treating this as a suspicious death pending the medical examiner's report, Morrison said carefully. But Mrs. Parker, I need to ask. Have you noticed anything unusual with your sons lately? Any conflicts or tensions? This was the moment. I took a shaky breath and said, actually, there was something. I probably should have mentioned it before, but I thought I was imagining things. About 3 weeks ago, I noticed discrepancies in my bank account, money being transferred that I didn't authorize. When I asked Michael about it, he helps me with my banking. He said it was just interest calculations that looked like transfers. But I pulled out my phone. I've been keeping track. I showed her the banking app with the transactions highlighted. Detective Morrison's interest was clearly piqued. You're saying your son Michael may have been stealing from you? I didn't want to believe it, I said, allowing tears to come. He's my baby boy, but I've been too afraid to confront him directly. Nearly $40,000 is missing. Another officer approached with a laptop. Detective, you need to see this. On the screen was a social media post from Jennifer's Instagram, posted yesterday at noon, around the time she'd been at my house confronting Andrew. It showed her and Michael together at Pike Place Market, his arm around her waist, captioned, "With my love. Soon we start our real life together." The post had been scheduled in advance but auto-published after her death. Detective Morrison's jaw tightened. Mrs. Parker, were you aware that your son Michael and Ms. Jennifer Foster were in a relationship? I let my face show genuine shock, which wasn't difficult. What? No, that's impossible. She was engaged to Andrew. They're getting married in December. There must be some mistake. Over the next 2 hours, as I gave my formal statement at the police station, I watched the investigation shift. Andrew was brought in for questioning, and I was told his story. He'd fought with Jennifer about money, gone to a hotel to clear his head, and was devastated to learn of her death. Phone records showed he'd been at the Everett Holiday Inn when I discovered the body. Hotel cameras and staff confirmed his presence. Michael, when police finally located him at a friend's apartment, told a very different story. He claimed he'd witnessed Andrew push Jennifer deliberately in my backyard, that it was clearly murder, and that Andrew had threatened him to stay silent. But his story had holes. Why hadn't he reported it immediately? Why was there evidence of him being romantically involved with his brother's fiancée? And most damaging, why had he been systematically stealing from his mother while planning to flee the state with Jennifer? Detective Morrison found something else, Margaret told me when she arrived at the station to support me. When they searched Michael's apartment with a warrant, they found plane tickets to San Diego for November 17th. 2 tickets, booked months ago. They found documents showing he'd opened accounts with Andrew's stolen identity. And they found Jennifer's laptop, which had emails discussing the entire scheme. 3 days later, the medical examiner's report confirmed that Jennifer's death was consistent with an accidental fall. The angle of impact, the injuries, and the physical evidence all supported the conclusion that she'd lost her balance and struck her head on the decorative boulder. There was no evidence of a deliberate push with sufficient force to cause her to fall backward. But Michael's story crumbled under investigation. His claim that he'd witnessed murder didn't match the physical evidence. His financial crimes were undeniable. His affair with Jennifer, documented in hundreds of text messages and photos, gave him motive to potentially harm her if she'd threatened to expose their scheme or demanded more money. When confronted with Andrew's recordings, which Andrew discovered when the private investigator he'd hired sent him a final report, Michael's entire narrative collapsed. The recordings proved Michael and Jennifer had conspired to steal from me, had planned to frame Andrew, and had cruelly confronted him in my backyard. While this didn't prove Michael had killed Jennifer, it established that he was a liar, a thief, and someone willing to destroy his family for money. In the end, Jennifer's death was ruled accidental. Andrew was cleared of any wrongdoing. Michael, however, was charged with multiple counts of fraud, identity theft, and grand larceny. He attempted to claim that Andrew had somehow framed him, but the evidence was overwhelming. My stolen money was recovered from the accounts he'd opened, all $37,150, plus the funds he'd stolen from Andrew. The day Michael was sentenced to 8 years in prison, I sat in the courtroom and felt nothing. No satisfaction, no sadness, just a hollow emptiness where my love for my younger son had been. He'd made his choices. He'd revealed who he truly was beneath the charm and the smiles. And while Jennifer's death had been a tragic accident, the cruelty and greed that had led to that moment were entirely intentional. Andrew slowly rebuilt his life. The trauma of what happened, the betrayal, the accident, the aftermath, took its toll, and he spent months in therapy. But he was free, and he was innocent. That was what mattered. Sometimes late at night, I wondered if we'd done the right thing. We'd manipulated evidence, constructed a narrative, and bent the truth to protect Andrew from consequences he might have deserved. But then I remembered Michael's voice on those recordings, his casual cruelty, his calculated theft. I remembered Jennifer's mocking laughter as she'd destroyed Andrew's world. Justice, I learned, isn't always about following rules. Sometimes it's about ensuring that the people who commit real crimes face real consequences, while those who make mistakes in moments of unbearable pain are shown mercy. I'm Evelyn Parker. I'm 62 years old. I lost one son to his own greed and ambition, but I saved another son from being destroyed by them. And I'd make the same choice again. If this story moved you, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. I'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. Your support means everything as I share this painful chapter of my life. Thank you for listening.